Hello, everybody. I believe I am now live. Thank you for joining me. If you are just coming on, let's see if I can see who's coming on. Okay, so people will be hopping on soon. So I am feeling just really, I don't know if there's a word to describe it, just really passionate about sharing what I have to share with you today in this live broadcast, because there's been some huge shifts happening for me around my business and a new focus that I wanted to share with you. So I'm just sort of waiting to see if we'll have some people coming on live to watch this versus the replay. If you're watching the replay, feel free to say hi. And I see we have a couple live viewers now on, so please feel free to say hi and let me know you are here so I can witness you as we are about to dive into the content. So let's see if I can see. Okay, hi Keely. There we go, there's a heart. Awesome. So, talking all about worthiness. And so in this broadcast, I want to cover three things. What's the deal with worthiness? Why am I all of a sudden talking about it so much? Why it's so important right now that we start to claim our worth, and how we can start doing that. What are the first steps to doing that? Hello, Julia. Hello, Joe. Thank you guys for being on live today. So let's see. Okay, there we go. What's the deal with worthiness? I know I can get it to work. So as you all know who are watching this live, and many of you who will be watching the replay, a few months ago, I created a huge shift in my focus and in my business. And I changed my business name to Big Beautiful Breakthrough. And because I knew that what my superpower was to really be facilitating deep transformational breakthroughs for my clients and my community. And yet, a question remained. There's this question that still like sat in me for a long time, like, but what is the Big Beautiful Breakthrough? What is it? Right? So I've been sitting on that for a while and just kind of waiting for the answer to arrive. And then a few weeks ago, it was just any normal morning. It was a Monday morning. It was actually the day before my birthday. And I was just reading an online article about opioid addiction that my friend actually wrote. And so the article had nothing to do with this at all. And all of a sudden, this sentence popped into my mind. And it was, I am worthy. Just this one sentence, I am worthy. And so because it was like different from what I was reading, I was like, that's interesting. And then as I sat with that and I was like, I am worthy, what happened was, it was like there was this like crystal ball in front of me. And I all of a sudden I saw how everything came back to that. I am worthy. All the work I've been doing with my clients, all the breakthroughs I'd facilitate, all the work I've done on myself, all the things my community told me that they were struggling with, it all came down to worthiness. And then I was able to really clearly see all these wounding patterns that I and my community, my clients, like really struggle with. The most common ones being wounds of invisibility, always putting other people before yourself, never being able to put yourself first, struggling with boundaries, not giving yourself permission to feel things like joy and feeling proud and feeling fulfilled, sabotaging your own sense of self-happiness, those like big fears of rejection and abandonment. Oh, big ones, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, right? It's never enough. I'm never good enough. All of these things that I've been hearing, myself say over the last several years, and my clients say, and my community, and like the emails in my inbox, I realized it all connected to a core wound of unworthiness, all connected to a core wound of unworthiness. In that moment, I knew that this is what I needed to be talking about. This is what I needed to talk about. And the interesting thing about this is that, as you guys know, I've been writing a book, right? And I had finished the first draft of this book. And I went back to that book and I saw how this core wound of unworthiness was like straight throughout this book I'd written, which is, it is a hybrid of a memoir and a self-help book. So each chapter I share about my own personal experiences, very personal experiences, by the way, very vulnerable, very raw, of how I really learned how to recognize these lies I've been telling myself in order to then discover the truth about who I really was. So it's really about my journey the last 20 years, but also going back to childhood. And so I re-looked at that book and I realized this all has to do with unworthiness too. Like, that's the running piece. And I was able to see how my journey to this point in time all had to do with me really claiming my sense of self-worth. So that is how I landed here. That's how I've been sort of keeping this like under wraps for a while, as it's sort of been brewing in me. As you can see, my wall behind me, there's been a lot of like brainstorming and whiteboarding and Post-it noting and all this stuff. But like realizing it's all revolved around this. So I want to shift now to, and before I shift, I also am going to share at the end of this live an experience, the experience that I had where what I just shared was really about unworthiness. And I want to share an experience I had a few months ago, which really signified this huge shift within me regarding my own sense of self-worth, where my sense of self-worth really clicked. So I'm going to share that at the end too. So in the meantime, let's talk about why it's so important that we all start to claim our sense of self-worth. All of us that are grappling with this core wound of unworthiness, those of us that are struggling with those patterns and beliefs that I had talked about before. And I see that we have 4 viewers on right now, and you're all being a little bit quiet. So please let me know if like this is resonating with you, if you've struggled with these, if you feel yourself like struggling with this core wound, if you have noticed those patterns and those beliefs and coming up in your life as well. So okay, so why it's so important that we claim it now, and why I am feeling actually like sort of a sense of urgency around this, as if you've been seeing my Facebook post this week, you might be noticing. So, and I want to actually, to talk about this, I want to share what's been going on with me in my inner world this week. So I have been reading Hillary Rodham Clinton's book, What Happened, which is all about the 2016 election and Trump winning and all of that, like what happened from her perspective. And I'm not going to go into politics right now. I'm not going to go into the 2016 election. I'm not going to go into Trumpism. I'm not going to go into that. Don't worry. But I've been reading that book. And the point that I want to make in reading that book is that I was like so like wowed by how much that woman like has accomplished. Like, she has just accomplished so much in her lifetime. She has been so productive, like this huge legacy behind her. And not only her, but in the book, she just documents and talks about all like hundreds of people she's worked with that have implemented like so many positive changes, so much policy, so many programs that helped children, that help the poor, that help civil rights, that help women's rights, like so much, right? And so like, I'm like taking all this in. And then I noticed myself starting to go into this place of like, oh, why can't you be more like that? Oh my gosh, you have just done so little in comparison to her. Like, why are you just sitting around your house all day in meditation in your intuitive realm when you could be going out and doing all this stuff too? Like, why can't you be more part of the solution? Totally going into this place of comparison. Totally my wounds of unworthiness totally getting triggered by starting to compare myself with all of these change makers. And I noticed this, and so to confirm it, I drew a card. So I have a morning ritual of drawing around 2 cards for myself, just to kind of see where I'm at and see kind of where I want to be, like kind of focusing my energy for the day. So I went into my office, this room, my sacred space, and I drew a card. And of course, it was the devil confirming for me that, like, Charlotte, this is your bad place. This, when you start to compare yourself, your core wound of unworthiness gets triggered, and then it can snowball, right? So I'm like, okay, yes, I see that. Totally see that. And you know, this core wound of comparison is a huge trigger for all of us that struggle with this core wound of unworthiness. So what happened was, I've gotten to this point that I can, and I know that we all can get to this point where we can kind of witness our triggers and see it and not try to shift it immediately, because when we try to shift from a mind place, it doesn't work, right? We just end up kind of in this place of fighting with ourselves and like kind of pushing and like self-criticism. So I just sat with it. I was just compassion. I was like, okay, yep, there's the trigger. Yep, it kind of feels like shit. And just sort of inviting myself to shift my energy, however that was going to happen. And then I had 2 client calls, and nothing like shifting your energy than like going into your zone, like your zone of genius. And when I'm on a one-on-one call with a client, like I am in my zone. This is like where I am just myself, and where my real gifts like completely emerge just through this process of just sort of like asking questions and making observations with my clients. And so I had this particularly really powerful session with a client where she had a major breakthrough, where she was able to, we kind of went to a piece of her core trauma and the ways that she had sort of framed it from this place of self-hatred and shame. And she was able to, like, through just some words from me, be able to totally reframe it, totally rewrite the story for herself from this place of resilience and power and compassion. And when that happened, it's like, whoosh, you know, it's like these are the moments that I live for, right? When this like bubble bursts and like tears come, and she was able to like come into this new place within her heart and really like come into this new relationship with this part of herself. And in that moment, it's like all the unworthiness just like vanishes. Because this is like, no, this is my power. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because it's so important in order to claim our worth, to really be able to claim our particular power. That it's a different kind of power than these loud and active change makers have, like Hillary Rodham Clinton, right? It's a quiet form of power. It's a kind of being a change maker that changes people from the inside rather than the outside. And so I'm talking about this because what I have observed in my work, in just my personal journey, in my community in the last several years, is that those of us that struggle with this core wound of unworthiness are some of the most compassionate, some of the most giving, some of the most empathic, some of the most intuitive, and some of the most kind people alive. It's this like, we are in this like dichotomy with ourselves, that we have this tremendous amount to give, and it gets locked up because we are suffering from this huge wound of unworthiness. And so just think about that for a second. Like, think about that for a second. Like, how much kindness and empathy and compassion, like all these amazing qualities that, as you know, are this like really powerful at helping people shift from the inside. And look at our world right now. Look at our world right now. Hatred, division, fear, ignorance. Another quality of people who are often suffer from really low self-worth is that they're incredibly self-aware. And then there's this kind of mass, what's the opposite of self-awareness? Delusion, right? So think about that, and how much this new form of power, this different form of power, which has not really been recognized, which has been sort of like kept under wraps because we suffer so much from unworthiness. Think about how much that is needed. Think about how powerful we could all be when we come together, when we start to claim our self-worth, and how much that is needed, how desperately that is needed. All right, I just want to read some comments here. Keely says, very resonant. Julia says, oh yeah, definitely have felt those feelings many times. Joe says, like the color of your Post-it notes. Thank you. Marla, oh, hi Marla. Self-worth has always been an issue. Perfectionism. Oh, so me. Yeah, definitely. Joe says, oh, you are so making change. Aw, thank you, Joe. And she says, yep, I can feel the potential power of that. Yeah, definitely. So much still in potential though, right? Because there's so much of us, so many of us that really haven't like stepped up to the gate, stepped up to the full power of who we really are, to the fullness of this quiet form of power. Because we get stuck in perfectionism, because we get stuck in comparison, because we get stuck in an imposter syndrome, which are all indications of a deeper wound of unworthiness. All right, so I hope I've convinced you, right? Have I convinced you? Have I convinced you that this is really necessary right now? Let me know. And as I move into how we can begin to claim our worthiness, there's always the question of like, oh yes, I know it's important, but how? Like, I know I struggle with this. I know it's important, but how the hell do we start to actually tackle this stuff? Because as I said, like the ways that we behave in our everyday lives, the beliefs that we carry about our unworthiness are indications of deeper core wounds of unworthiness. And when I talk about unworthiness, let's like actually take it back for a second. Like when we talk about unworthiness, like what do we really mean? For me, what I see unworthiness in most people, and including myself, unworthy of love, unworthy of happiness, unworthy of attention and being seen, unworthy of receiving, unworthy of, unworthy of fulfillment and success. So those are the biggies. And unworthy of just being able to like choose you, unworthy of choosing yourself. Powerful. Okay, so what can we start to do about this? And so I want for a second to talk a little bit about the difference between self-love and self-worth, self-love and worthiness. And there's a garbage truck behind me. So there might be a little noise. So because a lot of people talk about self-love, and a lot of people kind of marry the two together, and they are related, but there's some core differences between the two. So self-love, for me anyway, is an experience. It's a feeling that comes from the heart. Worthiness is a knowing. Worthiness is a knowing in your mind and in your body and in your heart. Self-love is like the result that happens. It is this wonderful result that happens when we actually believe in our own worthiness, when we actually take actions to claim our worthiness. The result is self-love. So basically, to begin to claim your worthiness, and the first key is in that statement that I just put up, actually. The first key is the first step to claim it is to actually claim it, to actually start acting like you're worthy. And so this means that worthiness is really tied up in so many choices that you make throughout your day, so many actions that you take, so much fear that you experience, and how you react to that fear. Are you going to welcome it in and face it and go through it? Or are you going to back off and listen to the unworthiness and follow that instead? It's really about making different choices. All those little choices that add up to you shifting your beliefs in your worthiness. So, and you're probably saying like, oh, well, that is like way easier said than done. I totally agree. So here's the thing. The reason why we need to start doing this, when you start acting like you're worthy, even when you don't believe that you're worthy, it's going to trigger the fuck out of you. It will trigger your unworthiness wounds like crazy. Totally crazy. You get really, really triggered. And guess what? That is actually the point. That's the point. You actually want and need to trigger yourself. So with my clients, what I call this the playground. Because you are, instead of unintentionally getting triggered and getting yourself into these situations where you end up in your old wounding pattern, you're actually creating a safe environment for yourself to get triggered and then work through it. So how do you do this? This is the second key. The first key was act like you believe it. Act like you're worthy even if you don't believe it. The second is you do these things so you get triggered. So you enter the playground, but you do so with support. So this is not something that you do by yourself. You intentionally act worthy when you don't feel it. You get your core wounds of unworthiness triggered, and then you have a consistent support there to help you through it. So that support may be like a group that you're a part of. It could be a women's circle that you're part of. It could be working with a coach. It could be working with a therapist, something consistent. I just want to emphasize that doing this type of work and claiming our worth, it's time not to continue going at it alone. It's time not to continue going at it alone. And you notice that I really scaled back so much on my self-study materials because I had that came to me several months ago where it's just self-study. It's just not the time anymore. Like, we really need to be able to have the support systems and circles around us to work through these deeper, difficult, challenging stuff, and to hold faith and to hold confidence in ourselves that we can work through it. And it can be actually a lot easier with that support than we think it's going to be. So definitely do this with support. And the next piece is, so when we when we trigger, we get really triggered. When those core wounds of unworthiness get triggered, and we have the support, what happens is, and this is the third key, is that we have somebody, and I guide my clients through this process. I do it with my clients. You don't necessarily do it with me, but we all, this is ultimately what we want to happen, is that we are guided then into our heart, right? So rather than getting stuck in our mind with this wonderful group of support that are mirroring back to us love and compassion, we then come into our own hearts. And in our heart, we're able to open to our own sense of compassion, but also we're able to get to the roots of that core wound, of unworthiness, and understand it and integrate it in a whole different way, from a place of wholeness, from a place of perspective. We're able to rewrite that story for ourselves and integrate it in a whole different way. Just as I had talked about with that moment, just yesterday with a client of mine, where she was able to reframe and rewrite this story of this piece of how unworthy she felt about herself in a completely new way. And so with every time we do that, whether it's like a huge breakthrough or just a tiny little breakthrough, every time we do that, every time we act like we're worthy, it becomes a little bit easier. And every time we believe it just a little bit more. And over time, the more we do this, the more when we're acting like we're worthy, we're believing it too, and we're feeling it too. So there's all of this type of work, right? This spiritual work. It's just repeat, repeat, repeat. Every time we repeat the process, it becomes a little bit easier, a little bit more fulfilling, a little less triggering. Just as, just as I was saying how yesterday morning I was just simply sitting with my trigger. I could feel it there, but it wasn't consuming me. I wasn't getting carried off in these unworthiness beliefs, because I had for the last several years really been working through this process for myself as well. All right, how does that process feel to you? How does that feel? Does it feel overwhelming? Does it feel exciting? Does it feel like, are you doing this already? So let me know how you're reacting to all of that. I would love to hear that. And as you are sharing, I want to sort of, as the last piece of this live video, I wanted to share with you the moment things really shifted for me, the moment that I really knew how worthy I was. And I'm just reading comments, sorry. Jessica says, hi, Charlotte. Wish I wasn't needing to jet to the post office so I could hear this live. You sound powerful and confident. Awesome. Well, I hope that you will listen later, Jessica. Thank you for jumping on for a moment. Keely says, hopeful. Awesome. Yes, that's exactly what I hope that all of you will feel from watching this video. That is so possible, and there's so much hope. And we're all so much more powerful and capable than we know that we are. Okay. So the moment that this all really clicked for me, and this huge shift, I've experienced this huge shift within me regarding my own self-worth. So it was a few months ago, and I was going to visit a friend of mine who I had never met in person. She lives about 5 hours away. And so she's somebody who has been part of groups I participate in, circles, healing groups, mutual friends in common, and we have nurtured this like really beautiful friendship, and we spent a lot of time on Zoom calls together, one-on-one, and we never actually met in person because she's a little bit of distance away. And yet for months we had talked about like, we need to arrange some kind of like in-person meetup, because when you like create these great connections, it's awesome to spend time virtually, but it's also really wonderful just to actually give each other a real life IRL hug, right? So so we finally were able to arrange it. And so I was going up to visit her. And so something about this friendship is that I was completely aware of the fact that for a long while, I had sort of put her on a pedestal. And I noticed myself saying things about her like, oh my gosh, she's so much more gifted than me. She's so much more intelligent and educated, spiritually educated. And she's got so much more powerful spiritual gifts than I do. And oh my gosh, I wish I could do what she does. And I wish I had the presence that she had. And all these sorts of things. I've noticed myself thinking those things about her, like going into this place of comparison. You know, whenever we put someone on a pedestal, the issue is that then we are like way down beneath them, right? So it's not only harmful for them because we're not allowing them to be like a full human being, but then we're really like digging into our own wounds of unworthiness. So I noticed this, and I knew that it was like problematic, but I sat in compassion with myself. And again, when you kind of just create the space for it through a place of compassion and self-awareness, you also create the space for it to shift. And so we planned this weekend, and I drove up to see her, and we had a wonderful day and night together. And, you know, we had all these beautiful long soul talks and conversations and heart shares. And something interesting happened, because during that trip, I was really able to see how imperfect she was. And from this place of like love, like loving her even more, and seeing how herself as this whole kind of human being. And in that, I also saw like how imperfect I was with her. And it's almost like we're sort of like laughing at ourselves through this perspective of like how imperfect each of us were. And because we've grown so close, we're really able to be really human with each other and share and like let our imperfections be really present. And so I left that trip like feeling a lot closer to her and feeling a shift in our relationship, going from something that was a lot more real. And this is why I love long drives, right? Because they give you all this time for inner reflection. And so during that drive home, it was just a moment. I was just driving, and then all of a sudden I had this like feeling, as you know, I was just reflecting back over our visit and our conversations. I had this feeling, and it was as if this like other version of me was like came out of me and was like looking at me. So if I was like looking at myself for the first time through different eyes, and I was just felt like, oh my gosh, Charlotte, you are so awesome. Like, you are so awesome. And it was not an ego moment at all. And that's something I want to emphasize. It wasn't like those times, you know, like, for example, I do a live video and then like, oh my God, I got 40 comments on this video and all these views and oh, you know, yay me. Like didn't come from the head. It didn't come from the ego like that. It really was like, it was as if my heart was talking to me, like had come out and was looking at me and revealing, and I'm getting choked up because this is so powerful moment, was revealing like my true self and my essence. And I was seeing myself clearly for the first time. And I was just sort of in awe of that moment. And I've carried that moment with me because of course it shifted, as it always does. We can't have these moments all the time. And ever since then, though, something awakened in me, a full knowing. And that now whenever I get triggered, I still carry that sense of knowing. I still carry that sense of like, my heart knows how freaking worthy I am, how awesome I am, how beautiful my presence is, how important I am, how I am a gift to, my presence is a gift to anybody. And so ultimately, this is what I want everybody, all of you, every woman, who experiences a sense of unworthiness to shift into, because these wounds we carry with them the rest of our lives, but we can transform our relationships to them in a huge, radical way, to a place where we can really, really claim our gifts, claim our power, and not feel held back and caged by these wounds that keep us really small and in hiding. Joe says, wow, that's some lovely sharing. Thank you. So as we wrap up, I'm just wondering if you have any other comments, any other reactions. Feel free to hit the heart button, the like button, the ha-ha button, any other comments or reflections. Because I think that's about it. I talk, and whenever I do these shares, I talk and talk and talk until I'm like empty, until I'm done. So, just a final thought is that, coming into a place of worthiness is really not about thinking ourselves perfect, thinking ourselves, fixed, right? It's about actually embracing our imperfections. It was through that moment when I was able to embrace someone I loved, her imperfections, and my own. And that's when it really clicked within me. And so worthiness is a place of wholeness. It is not a place of being perfect. And actually embracing our imperfections and loving them and seeing the gifts that they offer us is the path towards really knowing our worthiness. Julie says, I've had a similar moment before, very powerful. Oh, I would sometime love to know that moment, Julia. Joe says, that really was a beautiful realization. Yes, it was. Thank you. All right. Thank you for watching this live, for those of you who are on. And if you're watching the replay, feel free to leave comments too, and I will definitely catch them. And thank you for watching as well. And I leave for vacation tomorrow for 6 days, so I'm excited about that. And I hope that you all have lovely days and weekends, and I will see you all very soon. All right, bye.